It happened on a sunny Tuesday morning. I watched in horror as an HOA enforcer fired a taser at my 76-year-old husband, John. What they didn't know was that his former special operations team already had laser sights trained on their chests. John Harper retired as a 3-star Army general 6 years ago after serving 45 years in the military. His weathered face tells stories of deployments that government documents still won't acknowledge. Despite his age, he stands tall with military posture, his eyes still sharp with tactical awareness. I've been married to him for 41 years, standing by through deployments, relocations, and the transition to civilian life. We moved to Oak Ridge Heights 8 months ago, seeking peace and proximity to our grandchildren. The brochure promised premium living with exceptional community standards. What we found was a neighborhood imprisoned by its own homeowners association. Homes identical, lawns precisely measured, and residents living in fear of violation notices. Barbara Peterson, or Barb, as she insisted on being called while issuing citations, runs the HOA like her personal fiefdom. Her clipboard and perpetual scowl have become symbols of oppression for residents. She wears pastel cardigans like armor and treats HOA bylaws as sacred text. John found it amusing at first. The HOA manual was thicker than his Pentagon briefing binders. The enemy has changed, but the bureaucracy remains the same, he joked. Nevertheless, we complied, hoping for quiet evenings and weekend visits from our grandchildren. Our first clash came when John installed a flagpole in our front yard. A proud American who bled for his country, he raised both the American flag and his Army unit flag each morning at sunrise. He stood at attention, sometimes in his old dress uniform, saluting as they unfurled in the morning breeze. 3 days later, a violation notice appeared on our door. Non-conforming patriotic display. It read, secondary flagpole, not approved by architectural committee. The fine was $150. John didn't argue. He carefully filed the notice in a folder labeled Oak Ridge Absurdities and continued raising his flags every morning. The notices kept coming. Excessive patriotic display. Unauthorized gathering during flag ceremony. Non-conforming historical military memorabilia visible through front window. Each one went into John's growing file. He never raised his voice or showed anger. They don't understand what that flag means, he told me quietly one evening. They see decoration. I see the faces of men who never came home. Barbara took personal offense to John's quiet defiance. At the monthly HOA meeting, she announced that aggressive military displays create an uninviting atmosphere. Several neighbors looked uncomfortably at John, who sat silently in the back row, hands folded in his lap. One young father, whose son admired John's flag ceremony, spoke up. General Harper served our country. He has every right to fly those flags. Barbara cut him off, citing HOA bylaws about community aesthetic harmony. That night, I found John at his desk making phone calls. I recognized that focused expression from his command days. When I asked what he was doing, he simply said, reconnaissance. The first rule of engagement is knowing your opposition. Over the next week, I noticed subtle changes. Small cameras appeared in our garden gnomes. John spent hours on his laptop, reviewing footage. Former members of his unit began visiting. Men and women in their 50s and 60s who greeted him with crisp salutes despite their civilian clothes. Just old friends catching up, he explained when I asked. But I recognized mission planning when I saw it. These weren't social calls. Meanwhile, Barbara escalated. The HOA authorized a community standards patrol. 5 men in beige uniforms with patches reading code enforcement and community safety. They carried flashlights, citation books, and, most disturbing, batons and pepper spray. They began photographing violations and conducting compliance sweeps through the neighborhood. John watched them with the calm assessment of someone who had once monitored hostile insurgents. Amateurs playing soldier, he commented. Always dangerous. The community standards patrol grew bolder each week. They measured grass with rulers, timed how long garbage bins remained at the curb, and issued citations for non-approved bird feeder styles and excessive holiday decorations. One elderly couple received a $200 fine for wind chimes that exceeded the authorized auditory profile. John continued his quiet documentation. His former intelligence officer, now a silver-haired grandmother of 4, helped install discreet cameras in our yard and those of willing neighbors. His communications specialist set up secure channels for residents to share footage and complaints. The neighborhood is talking, I told John after my book club meeting. Everyone has stories about these patrols. Mrs. Fitzgerald was in tears because they confiscated her deceased husband's Marine Corps garden stone. John nodded. Tyrants always overreach. It's just a matter of time. That time came sooner than expected. I was in the kitchen when I heard John's voice sharpen with command, a tone I hadn't heard since his retirement. I rushed to the front door to find him confronting a patrol member who had his face pressed against our living room window. "Step away from my property," John said, his voice quiet but carrying the authority that once directed military operations. The man, barely 30 with an oversized utility belt, sneered. "We have authorization to inspect all visible violations. Your military display case violates Section 8 of the community standards." John stepped closer. Despite being nearly 50 years older, he suddenly seemed to tower over the younger man. "That display contains medals of honor earned by men who died protecting your right to play dress-up. You will step away now." The patrol member's hand moved toward his pepper spray. John didn't flinch. "I wouldn't," he said calmly. "My security system is currently recording this interaction from 3 angles, and I'm quite certain that impersonating law enforcement carries significant penalties in this state." The man backed away, muttering into his radio. As he left, John turned to me with a grim smile. "They'll escalate now. They have to. It's what insecure authority always does when challenged." That night, we received an emergency violation notice with a $500 fine for threatening HOA personnel and demand to remove all military displays within 24 hours. John added it to his file. Without comment, July 4th arrived with perfect summer weather. John invited several veterans from the neighborhood for a barbecue. He raised an oversized American flag and his unit flag at dawn, standing at attention in his dress uniform, medals gleaming in the morning sun. By noon, our backyard filled with neighbors, many bringing their children to meet the general. John, now changed into casual clothes but still wearing his veteran's cap, flipped burgers and told sanitized war stories to wide-eyed kids. At 2 p.m., Barbara arrived with 3 patrol members. She marched across our lawn, clipboard in hand, face flushed with authority. "This gathering exceeds the permissible number of guests," she announced. "And that oversized flag is a direct violation of the holiday decoration standards." John wiped his hands on a towel and approached calmly. "This is Independence Day. Barbara, we're celebrating the freedom that allows for communities like this to exist." "Rules are rules, General," she said, emphasizing his title with mockery. "The bylaws don't make exceptions for military sentimentality." One of the patrol members began measuring our flagpole with a tape measure. Another took photos of our guests. The third approached our American flag and unhooked it from its halyard. The backyard fell silent. John's face hardened as a patrol member bunched the flag carelessly under his arm. "That flag will be returned to its proper position," John said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Now." The patrol member smirked. "Or what, old man? Your fighting days are long over." John straightened to his full height, shoulders squared. "My fighting days began before you were born, son, and they haven't ended yet." Barbara stepped between them. Citation for threatening behavior. Another for unauthorized gathering. Remove the flags or face further consequences. John stood motionless, eyes fixed on the improperly handled flag. Every veteran in attendance had gone silent, tension building like a thunderstorm. "I will ask one more time," John said quietly. "Return the flag to its proper position." The patrol member dropped the flag to the ground. "Make me Grandpa." In one fluid motion that belied his 76 years, John stepped forward. The patrol member panicked, drawing his taser and firing. The barb struck John in the chest, and he fell to one knee. What happened next seemed choreographed. Red laser dots appeared on the chests of all 3 patrol members. From behind trees, from neighboring yards, and from inside our house, men and women emerged. John's former team, weapons holstered but stances professional. One silver-haired woman helped John remove the taser barbs while keeping her eyes trained on Barbara, whose clipboard now trembled in her hands. John stood, brushing grass from his knee. As I was saying, he continued calmly, that flag represents something sacred to everyone here. You will pick it up, fold it properly, and apologize. The patrol member, now pale-faced with 3 laser sights on his chest, complied with shaking hands. What is this? Barbara demanded, her voice cracking. This is intimidation. This is a lesson in respect, interrupted a man in a suit who had appeared at our gate. He showed identification. Agent Thomas, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been monitoring this situation for some time. John nodded to him. Right on schedule, Agent. Agent Thomas addressed the stunned gathering. We have documented evidence of private citizens impersonating law enforcement, illegal seizure of property, extortion through unauthorized fines, and now assault with a prohibited weapon. He turned to the patrol member who had tasered John. That device is restricted to law enforcement use in this state. You're under arrest. As the patrol members were handcuffed, John retrieved his folder of documentation and handed it to the agent. Everything's here. Dates, times, violations of federal and state law, all witnessed and notarized. Barbara's face had lost all color. This is absurd. We're a legal homeowners association with enforcement authority granted by our bylaws. Agent Thomas flipped through John's documentation. Your HOA charter expired 14 months ago. You collected approximately $237,000 in unauthorized fines since then. That's fraud, Ms. Peterson. More agents arrived, along with local police. Barbara was escorted to a waiting vehicle, still protesting her authority. The patrol members were taken away separately, their fake badges confiscated. As the law enforcement vehicles departed, the neighborhood remained in our backyard, stunned into silence. Then Mrs. Fitzgerald, the widow whose Marine Corps memorial stone had been confiscated, approached John with tears in her eyes. You planned all this, she said. You let them push and push until they went too far. John helped her to a seat. In tactical operations, you don't engage until the target has fully revealed itself. The HOA needed to demonstrate its true nature before it could be properly addressed. Throughout the evening, neighbors shared their stories. A retired teacher had been fined for having a small reading group in her home. A firefighter had received citations for parking his emergency response vehicle in his own driveway. A young mother had been threatened with eviction for her autistic son's disruptive behavior at the community pool. They ruled through fear, said John's former intelligence officer as she helped collect evidence from neighbors. Classic authoritarian technique. Create arbitrary rules, enforce them inconsistently, make examples of those who resist. Agent Thomas returned later that evening to update us. Barbara and 2 HOA board members were being investigated for fraud, harassment, and civil rights violations. The Community Standards Patrol members faced charges for impersonating law enforcement and assault. We've been investigating HOA abuses across the state, he explained. Yours isn't the first to operate as a private fiefdom, but it's certainly one of the most egregious cases we've seen. As neighbors departed, many stopped to shake John's hand or embrace him. One young father summed up the collective feeling. You fought for us overseas, and now you fought for us here. Thank you, General. John simply nodded. Freedom isn't just something you defend abroad. Sometimes the battle comes to your own front yard. An emergency neighborhood meeting was called the following week. The clubhouse overflowed with residents, the atmosphere charged with relief and anticipation. The federal investigation had frozen all HOA accounts and suspended its authority pending legal proceedings. A county administrator explained that the neighborhood needed new leadership to handle essential services like landscaping and pool maintenance. Nominations were open for an interim committee. General Harper called out several voices simultaneously. John looked surprised as applause broke out across the room. I'm not sure I'm the right choice, he said when the noise died down. I'm 76 years old and not looking for a new command. Mrs. Fitzgerald stood up. You protected us when no one else would. You understand that leadership is about service, not power. John considered for a moment, then nodded. I'll serve as interim chair on one condition, that we rebuild this community on principles of respect and transparency. His first official act was to shred the 347-page HOA rulebook. His second was to draft a simple 2-page community agreement focused on mutual consideration rather than rigid conformity. His third was to install a community flagpole where residents could raise flags meaningful to them, national flags, service flags, pride flags, on a rotating schedule. A community thrives when diversity is respected, not when conformity is enforced, he told the gathering. My years in command taught me that the strongest unit is one where individual strengths are recognized and honored. The former HOA office was converted into a community room. The citation forms were recycled into children's art supplies. The patrol car was donated to a local charity. As summer turned to fall, our neighborhood transformed. Front yards became expressions of personality rather than compliance. Community events sprang up organically. People spoke to each other without fear. John told me as we watched children playing freely in what had once been the unauthorized recreation zone, is what we fought for. True leadership isn't about control. It's about creating an environment where everyone can thrive with dignity. If you've ever stood up against petty tyranny or want to share your thoughts on community respect, leave a comment below. Your experiences matter. Subscribe and share this story to honor those who fight for freedom, both abroad and at home.